Hello, friends and YouTubers. Nick and Shane here to talk about the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 7, the finale. There will be spoilers. There will be a lot of truths, pros, and cons established in this episode of ours. So you are warned. Shane, how are you doing today?
Hang on just one second. I had to get in the spirit of this episode. And so
Okay,
before I
perfect.
answer the question, okay, now I can answer. I had to spinning. It was a cool trick.
Oh, man.
I can't shoot straight without spinning first.
True.
But yeah, I'm doing well. I a little disappointed in the episode, but we were kind of expecting it, so I'm excited to delve into this one and the season as a whole.
Right. Yeah, we'll be covering the whole season, of course, because there's a lot to talk about in a condensed amount of time here. So, to kick it off, let's talk about the cons that
Oh God,
of this episode.
this is gonna take the whole thing.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to start off bad, and we'll get to the good. So, for those of you who are new here and watching this, listen, we both care about Star Wars a lot. And if you've watched the videos on the previous episodes, you can see that. But this show as a whole just wasn't established as well as we all hoped and thought it would be. Where we try to cover the storytelling, the plot, the details of character development, their choices. Not just be like it's good, it's bad, and it sucks, and that's it. Like we try to go into detail and clarify our subjective reasonings. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, one of the biggest things I'll just kind of throw out there is Chrysanthemum. I really thought in the moment where the Trandoshans are betraying him in their little peace treaty, he had his opportunity. He hates Trandoshans, and he has an opportunity to just go all out on the street, and he just gets dogpiled like it's a football game. And I really thought this would be a good chance for him to just let loose again, like he did in the bar. And he really did nothing, which was really unfortunate, and he tried to do something against the Terminator droid. I think they called it a Scorponok or Scorpionoid droid, something along those lines. It just looked like a mix between something out of T2 and Transformers.
Are you talking about the droidica things with the shield?
Yeah, the Droideka version 2 on crack.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, like he tried to do something to it, and it was like, oh, be gone, pest, and just like you yeeted him into the wall. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, so much for that too. So yeah, I think that was just a little bit of another missed opportunity with Chrysanthemum to just give him another shining moment in this short season. What about you?
So you lead with a good example of sort of the point that I'm going to make about this whole show in general is that there are a lot of moments that are payoffs with no setup and a lot of moments that are setups with no payoff. And that is basically this entire show. There's no real character development for anybody except Boba Fett, I guess, throughout this entire show. But like another good example of this is like the Rancor, right? Where we set this up kind of in like episode 2 or 3, I forget which one. And then we never hear really about him training the Rancor again. And then in the end, he comes out riding it, right? So it's like everything is designed, it feels like in this show to be like this big shocking moment or like this surprise, but none of it's earned. And so this entire finale, I found myself like watching a lot of things happen, but not caring about any of it. So like this entire setup is for this war for this city, and Boba Fett keeps saying like these people need me, and it's like when have we ever seen that they need him? Like the only thing that we've seen this entire show that like shows these citizens need help is that bombing that happened at the end of the prior episode. Like,
Right.
the city seemed like they were getting along just fine without Boba Fett, and he just kind of showed up, and then everything went to hell. So maybe he's the problem. But yeah, it's so weird to see just these basic storytelling elements missed. You've got a bunch of characters that are running around that we have seen maybe in one episode in passing. The Swoop Gang is like the best example, because we could have in a competent TV show, what we would have gotten is maybe a little episode where you meet those two like swoop gang, the girl and then the guy with the spinny guy with the
Right.
eye. And maybe it shows them struggling, and maybe they have a little backstory and they have a dynamic together, and then they find themselves kind of in Boba's like hands, right? And
Right.
that's how you develop them as characters, so that now anything that happens past that point, we care about them. And we didn't get that. So we're just watching people who we don't know what their names are, we don't know anything about them, and we're supposed to care about them. And it's really just indicative of this entire show that it doesn't set anything up.
Yeah, you're right. And I was hoping we wouldn't see the Power Ranger Vespas, but we did.
Oh yes.
I think a couple of the modders died in the battle there. But again, I felt nothing because
Yeah.
why should we really care about them at all? Like, that's the other issue is usually a show makes you care about at least a few characters, and I'm not even going to include the nostalgia that was thrown into this season. Not talking about Mando, not talking about Grogu, because we've had that established since Mandalorian season one.
Yeah.
This is the third season that they've appeared in. They don't count. I did like you can say that it does, but in terms of new writing material, like it's like again, I see them in this sort of this predicament, and it just reminds me of something that I've seen in Mando season 1 and 2, not the Book of Boba Fett. And then I was like, yeah, Boba just disappeared for a bit, and then of course he comes riding in the Rancor, and again, like we knew that was going to happen. We
Yeah.
didn't see
Easy
Danny
prediction.
Trejo since episode 3.
Yeah.
Don't know
What?
where he went. Like, is that all they could afford? Like,
I
Danny,
guess
listen, we just need you for one episode, and that's it. Like,
for 5 minutes.
he just disappeared. Like, it would have been cool to see him in battle, right? Like,
I would have liked to see like a little, like we talk about the training montages throughout this
yeah,
whole show, like a little, like he's got to tame the Rancor kind of
yeah,
thing, and he
yeah,
never does that. He just shows up riding it. Like if there's no like indication of how he learned to do that, then it's just a moment that's there for surprise, right?
yeah,
And this is really the whole show, right? Like Cad Bane shows up out of nowhere, and the only reason we're supposed to care about Cad Bane is because he's in the Clone Wars and maybe something else. I forget. I haven't seen all of them. The only reason we're supposed to care is because we already know that character, right?
right,
And then
right.
he dies 45 minutes later. So
Yep,
it's like, what was the point of that? Like, if you look at a simple like storytelling structure, the way that this should be done is you introduce Cad Bane in like episode 1, right? And maybe you include a little flashback, because I guess the backstory is that like Cad Bane is the person who put the dent in his helmet or something like that.
yep, yep,
Um, like show that in the little back to tank flashbacks, a little cut, and maybe it's like reminding him of the trauma of his past, and they duel throughout the whole season, right? They go back and forth. Boba's got the upper hand, Cad Bane's got the upper hand, and then in the end you come to this finale where they come back together, and it's like, this is the moment where they're actually going to fight, right?
right.
Think of The Dark Knight Rises, right?
Yeah,
Batman and Bane also, they fight throughout the entire movie, right?
yep,
And Bane beats the shit out of Batman.
yep,
And then in the end, Batman comes back and then beats Bane, right?
right,
So
right.
that's kind of your arc of how a villain and hero story goes. And the same thing happened in Mando seasons 1 and 2 with Moff Gideon. He gets
Yep,
his ass kicked by Moff Gideon, finally beats him in the end. In this, Cad Bane just shows up and then he dies in 30 minutes. There's one fight between them. They see each other one time and they like talk about how they kind of imply that they know each other. But
yeah,
like if you haven't seen the Clone Wars, you have no fucking clue what that battle is. You've got
yep.
no reason to care for that battle. And so when he finally wins that battle, who cares? You haven't really developed any of either of these two characters and why they're fighting.
Yeah, I know a lot of people haven't watched the Clone Wars, much less Bad Batch season 1, where Cad Bane and Fennec had a little bit of a meeting as well. And I thought that again in this episode when Boba is lured out by Cad, right? And then Mando and Fennec are essentially there, but I thought Fennec would be like, "Oh damn, that's Cad Bane." Nothing. There's no acknowledgement, no sort of we gotta take this guy out sort of thing. It like again another missed opportunity. Not a lot of people are going to know that any of these people have ever met in the past. Much less know that that dent in his helmet is because of Cad Bane. So there's a lot that sure you can chalk that up as Easter egg material, but how much Easter egg material are you really going to rely on to
Yep,
carry the story of a season? Like,
100%.
you can't just rely on pure nostalgia and be like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then like it's such a great episode because of that. No.
Yep,
Easter eggs do not make a story. Easter eggs are there
correct.
as just little bits of material and detail to add to the overall emphasis of what's driving this show in the first place, which is Boba Fett.
Yep.
And yeah, I agree with you. We should have seen Cad Bane sooner. There should have been more emphasis on an actual villain because we said this early on, like in the first or second episode. Who is the villain? Is it the Huts? Is it someone else? Is it a cartel? Is it a syndicate? And then we finally, from the flashback say, oh, it's the Pike Syndicate because then we see them in the present time. But when we're 4 episodes in and thinking we've only got 3 episodes left, what are they going to do? We didn't think that we would see a whole episode devoted to Mando, and then another whole episode devoted to Luke Skywalker, Ahsoka, and Grogu.
Yep.
And that just takes away time from Boba Fett. And it's having conversations with people going, "Oh, but don't you like that stuff?" Yes, I do. I very much do. Just not in this show.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit. And I think for the sake of looking at character development for a character that was presumably dead and escaping the Sarlacc pit, learning about his backstory, but then not really having a lot that really supposedly had to deal with in the present day. Like, I think there's a missed opportunity here with the Disney format, like Marvel as an example. These 6 episodic shows:
Yep.
Loki, Captain Sam and Bucky,
Yep.
Hawkeye. The only thing that was different was Wanda. She got WandaVision got 9,
But
but
yeah, but structurally they're very similar, right?
oh yeah,
Where at the very end of each of those shows, you introduce this villain, and then there's the fight, like the next episode, right?
yep, yep,
They did it in WandaVision with Agatha. They did it in Hawkeye with Kingpin. They do it in the very end of Loki. They finally show you who the villain is. It's like this villain reveal party.
yeah,
And they
yeah,
did this again in Star Wars, where it's you finally reveal the villain in the final episode or next to final episode, and then he dies instantly. So it's like, what's the point? He's just another obstacle at that point.
yeah,
But I think you nailed it, where you said that Easter eggs can't drive a story, and that's where I feel like Star Wars is going wrong right now. Is
yeah,
right now they are trying to focus on how much shit can we jam into these shows, and they're forgetting like what is basic competent writing. What story are we trying to tell? What themes and struggles and everything like that, stakes. How are we going to develop those? You develop that first. And then after that, you can layer in Easter eggs and you can point to little nods to the fans. But if you don't have a core story that's working, that people care about, then it's all just stuff, right?
mhm,
This is basically what the finale was, with just stuff. There's a Rancor running around. We don't really care about it. There's all these people fighting. We don't really care about any of them. Grogu shows up and it's like, oh, well, we know him from another show. And it's like, this is the show. Like, why even bring Boba Fett out of the Sarlacc pit if you had no story to tell for him? It feels like they worked it backwards, where they were like, it would be so cool if Boba Fett was alive. So they bring him back. And then they're like, oh shit, what do we do with him? And they don't know. And so they kind of make a show and they're like, well, we still don't know what to do with him. So now it's Mandalorian season 3. It's so weird. And like even the Mando stuff, the big emotional moment from the end of season 2 was Grogu goes with Luke Skywalker, and Din Djarin's never going to see him again. Oh, just kidding. 2 episodes
thank
later,
you.
they're back together. It's like, what? That emotional payoff is totally ruined
Yep.
because you just reversed it 2 episodes later, and there's no stakes, there's no emotion, there's no characters that we care about. It's all garbage.
Yeah, there's a lot that they could have done differently. I mean, for Boba's sake, not that they were really going to, and I didn't expect them to pull from the source material aside from him actually living past the Sarlacc pit. But again, we discussed this in the last episode. If this show would have had more of a gangster mafia
Yeah.
betrayal Game of Thrones type feel to it, including other bounty hunters, like, okay, sure, you had Fennec Shan uh team up with him, you included Mando, you had Chrysanthemum in there, uh and you brought in Cad Bane, why not throw a couple other droids, or like, Zuckuss, Forlom, bring in Dengar. Like, there's so many other relevant bounty hunters that would technically still be existing in this time period that they could have brought this into. And again, I think for the sake of it turning into like a real darker, gritty type of show, they missed the bullseye on this one. you
Yeah.
know uh, like, not to say that the whole him having feelings and associations with the Tusken Raiders,
See, that part was interesting.
yeah, it wasn't bad at all. Like, I
That
think
was an
that was
actual story.
established, right? They established a story there,
Yeah.
and like, why not just kind of follow that suit?
Yeah.
And instead we have the Rancor climbing up a building like
Yeah,
he's
he's King Kong in
literally
it.
King Kong.
Yeah.
And then we had like King Kong versus Mecha Godzilla, i.e., the droid decoys on
Yeah.
crack. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And like, sure, as an action sense, okay, it was entertaining. It was kind of cool. Because we'd never gotten to see like a Rancor sort of like go all out in Star Wars movie wise, that is. Video games, yes, but um yeah, I don't know if I really have any other like super positive things to say about it, unfortunately.
No.
Like,
I thought of the 3 Robert Rodriguez directed episodes, this one was probably directed the best. There's
yeah,
still a lot of weird stuff that goes on that feels a little cheap.
yes.
Like the action sequences, they relied heavily, and funnily enough, I had this same issue with the Mando season 2 episode that he directed, the one where Grogu is like force talking to somebody, where he's like using the force on that
Oh,
little
The
platform,
Rock, yeah.
right? And he puts up like a force shield, and
Yep.
Mando like tries to go in the shield, and he
Repeatedly.
doesn't do it. And then he tries to go in the shield, and it doesn't work. And he tries to go in the shield, and it doesn't work. They did the same thing in this episode with the droids.
Droid deco. Yeah,
They were
you're
like,
right.
"We're gonna shoot it.
God.
Oh, it didn't work. We're gonna shoot it again.
Uh,
Oh, that didn't work. We're gonna use fire. Oh, that didn't work. We're gonna try shooting it more." And it's like they kept doing the same thing over and over. It's like, look, guys, it's not gonna work. Like, learn that. It
yeah,
only takes one.
there was an inconsistency there as well with the Rancor when Cad Bane stood face to face with the Rancor and used his flamethrower at it. It kind of like, sheared away from it. But then the Rancor has Mando in his hand, or in its hand, and then Mando flame throwers it into its mouth and in its face, and it didn't drop him. It didn't throw him. It just like it was like,
Yeah,
and then
there's no logic to
and
the
then
action
and then it threw him after that. But
sequences
I'm like,
at all.
wouldn't have been afraid because there was more fire in its mouth at that point. And we called it, or I think you had called it, how this was essentially Grogu saving the day, just like he did in episode 8, the season finale of Mando season 1, where they're trapped in the
And Luke
room.
saves the day.
And then no, and well, not when Luke saves the day, but in season 1 where
Oh,
it's like,
season 1.
yeah, in
Gotcha.
season
Yeah, yeah,
1,
sorry.
when Moff Gideon has them surrounded, right, and they're just kind of
Right.
smoking them out, right, and then the magma trooper comes in with the flamethrower and just starts, blasting, but Grogu uses the force and then just like
Yeah.
blows them up, right, and then passes out, and we think that Din Djarin's gonna die.
Right.
The same thing happened. He's like,
He like
and just puts the
gets
freaking
the
Rancor
force.
to sleep,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
and
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 then
then
sleep next to it.
and then
Like,
yeah, then
oh,
touches it, like pets it, and
yeah.
then goes and sleeps next to it. I'm like, I mean, that was adorable, but at the same
It was
time,
cute.
like, at the same time, I'm like, he saved the day because Din
Right.
Djarin was about to become, uh, doo doo and some hard to pierce armor. Um,
Yeah. There's a lot of things in this that don't logistically make sense. There's like one scene where the droids, where the guy's like, or I forget who it was, Mando or Boba, where they're like, we'll distract them, run. And then they like pan over and they're like jogging away. I'm like, you'd be running a little faster than that, right? And
yeah.
there's another scene where like Mando and Boba are trying to fight the droids, and they like aren't getting like they can't defeat them, and then they're like standing in the middle of the road talking. I'm like, those droids would shoot you. Like, you're
Yep.
not undercover. You're in the middle of the walkway, and it's like it just goes to show that I don't think Robert Rodriguez knows how to direct action very well. Uh, at least this kind of action, like that's one of those things where like, it's like Return of the Jedi, where they're like hunkered down in that little like awning thing,
Hmm.
Leia and Han, and they're like using it as cover. Like, use that to, you discuss your plan. Maybe every time you peek out, you get shot at. Something like that. Like, give it
Yeah.
logic.
As
It
I
doesn't
say,
make
it's
sense.
like common sense. Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
just be standing there in an open firefight hoping
Right.
not to get shot because like the camera's on you, so you can't possibly get hit by another blaster, right? It and like I understand like when they were sitting out in the open and they like conveniently only getting hit where there's Beskar armor.
Yeah.
But if
Exactly.
you look closely, I'm like, there's actually quite a bit of like open flesh
Yeah.
where they could still get hit. I'm like, are these
It's
syndicate the
plot
Pike
armor.
syndicate? Yeah, oh, plot armor on Beskar armors.
Yes.
Yeah, well, 100%. Like, and I get it. Like again, they're not going to die at that point. Although I thought again Boba might die, especially when it was the showdown between him and Cad Bane.
Yep.
But and that dialogue was okay. It was like a poor
It had
excuse
like
that
the weird like dissolves after,
yeah.
where like he beats him and then it like dissolves into a close up and then it dissolves into another one and he's just like, haha, I have done it. It's like, what is going on right now?
Yeah, he's like when Cad Bane rips his helmet off, right? And Boba just almost like accepts death at that point, but he also uses his gaffy stick.
I thought freaking what's his name was gonna shoot, Cobb Vanth was gonna like shoot him in the back. I really thought that was coming, but it was good that Boba was the one that did it, right?
Yeah.
Because he actually does something in the show. Finally.
Yeah. He saves his own ass
Yeah.
and then kills Cad Bane, who he calls him an old man. And yeah, I mean, by that point he is pretty old.
Yeah.
But he's still quick. He even says, I'm still faster than you, right? And it's like, well, we'll probably know that in just a moment. And he is. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I did think
uh,
one little cool action move too was where he like slid with the jetpack,
oh
like used
yeah.
it to like dash. That was kind of neat.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was really, really well done. Again, very Mando season one-ish with the Mandalorians flying around on their jetpacks. And I'm like, oh, they're finally using their jetpacks again, and shooting all the Pike syndicates and just taking them out. And I mean, look, that's great. That's what they should have been doing. I mean, it's like, oh, we're outnumbered.
Yeah,
I
they
don't care. We're
finally
Mandalorians. Like,
yeah, they finally learned that they can use their jetpacks like 3 seasons in to the show. The two seasons of Mando and 1 season of Boba Fett. It's like, "Oh yeah, we have these."
I mean, they basically used everything on that they could on Boba, or actually, I'd say, both Mando and Boba. Like Boba used both his little knee launchers, his rocket, his one rocket, on his jetpack, and then the flamethrowers. Mando used his I forget what
His
they're called.
little wrist rockets
Yeah, the little screeching
thingies. Yeah.
eagle things. Yeah, and so I mean, look, they had to in this sort of again the position that they're faced with, but um, I don't think it was all like the action was all bad, but there were moments where um, it just seemed very weird. Like it almost seemed like there was a moment where there was a Pike Syndicate that was up behind them, right? And they both get shot. They both turn around and blast him like multiple times as the body is like falling down.
Yeah,
And I
I
was just
remember
like,
that one. It just
oh,
looked cheap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean,
He just
he's
kind of
dead.
it looks like a body like a what do you call that? Like a dummy
Yeah.
when he's
Yeah.
falling. Yeah, I don't know.
Would you wish that they never did this in the first
Yes.
place?
Yes. Like, what's the point?
Yeah,
Uh,
like
I if you didn't have a story to tell, why tell it? I guess is my main thing. Like, what is going on in and this is maybe a question for overall Star Wars because we've
sure.
seen some pretty crappy Star Wars of late, and Rise of Skywalker was pretty awful too.
Yes.
And like, what is going on in the story department at Lucasfilm right now? Like, who's to blame here? Because like Favreau wrote this whole thing, and while I'm not like a huge John Favreau fan in general, like he's written good stuff before. I mean, he wrote Chef, he did Elf, you know, Iron Man, the original Iron Man is, all of these story problems that we talk about are not in those movies. Like all of those contain competent screenwriting.
Yeah.
And so it's like, where is this going wrong? I mean, is it Filoni? You know, is it too many like hands in the cookie jar where they're
Yeah,
all
too many
trying to
cooks
like,
in the kitchen sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. I don't understand why at this point Star Wars has become less focused on good storytelling, overall basic competent storytelling, and more on like how much stuff can we just jam in here that the fans are going to love. I mean, Rise of Skywalker is the same issue. It's like there's plenty of things in that movie that like if you took to like an intro to screenwriting class, they would rip it apart and be like, what is this? There's no, you're telling them the story, the exposition is, heavy-handed. This doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. Like these aren't stupid people. They've been in the industry for a long time. So clearly they know how to write a good script, but why aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other interesting thing too about uh a bit of a time, I don't say a bit of a time gap, but thinking of in this sense where Cad Bane spills the beans to Boba about his Tuscan friends,
Right.
and oh yeah, we it wasn't the Nikto swoop gang, it was actually the Pikes, we did it.
Yeah, what
And
what?
uh, oh, s-
Okay.
okay, yeah, it just seemed like a bit of a throw off to me, and
Right.
again, I'm like, and Boba's supposed to really like still have a grudge about that. I mean, perhaps, yeah. And again, I feel like if this was like a true mafia style movie, like, you know, the Italians or something like that, like if this was based on like a Godfather,
Right.
that is to be expected. The grudges are supposed to, still be held within and not let go until they've gotten vengeance, until they've gotten that payback. But we don't see that, like,
No.
or it's not established here, and I think that's what would have been a lot better and would have made more sense to do that. Yeah, I think the same thing would have been said, like, if you're looking at this from
Sorry.
a, if we're looking at this from an actual, creative writing workshop, from my old college days, and looked at the plot, looked at the themes, looked at the character development, like, if this was submitted at the end of the semester for a grade, like, I would be I wouldn't be surprised if this
You'd
got
fail.
not it you'd maybe get a C on this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm sorry, but that's not good enough for
No, it's
Star
not.
Wars.
It's absolutely not. And
You
that's
need
why
the material. And look, that's a high expectation.
yes, it is.
But at the same time, if you can't deliver it, don't make it. It's
Yep.
that simple.
Yep. And that's why, like, I'm thinking, this is a problem with Lucasfilm as a whole,
Yeah.
because if anybody had read this script, they would have asked these questions, right? Anybody competent would have asked these questions. And I know Kathleen Kennedy is competent. Like, produced
She's been around
all
for a
these
long ass time.
like Jurassic Park, maybe
Yep,
it's Jurassic Park,
it
like
was.
all of these famous movies, right?
Oh, yeah,
Like
Indiana
she knows
Jones,
what a
like,
good movie is. So like, why are they letting these things through the cracks when like it feels like they're just it's like that meme with like the water leak and they're just like throwing Easter eggs on the leak. It's like
yes.
they can't figure out a story, so they're just patching it with like characters you already know to get the fans off their backs.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like a Last Jedi thing. Maybe the Last Jedi like really spooked them, and they were like, okay, we have to like make sure that the fans have exactly what they want at all times. I mean, there was an article that came out recently with Lord and Miller when they were
Yep.
talking about Solo,
Yep.
and they said that one of the creative differences that they had, they didn't explicitly say this, but they kind of went on a rant about it when they were talking about how they got fired from Solo. And they said that you can't just give the audience exactly what they want. You have to surprise them. You have to go further than that. You can't just, put all this fan service in, because at that point it's not surprising, right? If you just if you wield it, uh, you know, haphazardly, then like all of these impacts go away. Like you have to show them something that's better than what they want. Otherwise, it's fan
Yeah.
fiction, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very surprising, I think, because of, even before, this show came out, and I want to say it was right around in between seasons 1 of 2 of The Mandalorian. A lot of people online were talking about, is or are John Favreau and Dave Filoni saving Star Wars because of like the post sequels,
Yeah.
especially after Rise of Skywalker came out. And a lot of people thought, just give Dave Filoni full creative control for everything Star Wars now, because he's George Lucas's protege. He can do
Yep.
no wrong. He knows the story. He knows the characters. He knows what George Lucas established from the beginning. He gets what inspired George, and he gets what inspired Star Wars to begin with, right? And sure, we got a little bit of that Western theme last episode and this episode as well, but yeah, it almost seems like there's John Favreau who wrote it, Dave Filoni who has like sort of this creative overlook,
Yeah.
and then you've got the director who's going, okay, well, John, I know this is in the script, but what if we did this instead? Or what if we included this, and change some of this dialogue here, and
Yeah, and I think that's still fine. Like it's always
yeah,
going to be a
it's always going to
process.
happen, right? But
I
like,
I I think my big issue is like everyone's talking about, John Favreau and Dave Filoni saving Star Wars, but
right,
I wasn't a big fan of Mando season 2, but I kind of let it slide. But this is like their brainchild. This is not like Robert Rodriguez is executive producer and stuff, but Favreau
yeah,
wrote the whole thing. Filoni was
yeah,
heavily involved in this.
yeah,
And Filoni was heavily involved in The Last Jedi too. So for all the people who are like, Filoni hates The Last Jedi, it's like, no, he and Ryan worked a lot on that movie. So it's like that was not just Ryan Johnson.
yep,
Dave Filoni had heavy influence on it.
yep,
And so I think it's just fans kind of wanting they were wish casting, right? That's like, oh, Dave Filoni gave us this, he's the savior of Star Wars, or John
right,
Favreau gave us this, he's the savior, and they're kind of ignoring that there's a lot of major issues with the storytelling that's going on right now, and those two are directly involved.
yeah, yeah. It's weird because especially with the Bad Batch, who it was which was fully written by Dave Filoni as well. And again, it was really weird because he was the one who had direct involvement between Fennec Shand and Boba Fett, and you had the opportunity last episode and this episode, but there was no correlation.
You mean
Like
Cad Bane?
yeah, sorry, Cad Bane
Yeah,
and Fennec Shand. Sorry, even a line of dialogue would have been like from her saying like something like, I don't know, thought you had died a long time ago, old man, and like that's
right.
been a while
Yeah,
since I saw you on
right,
on
right.
what it was like an abandoned station, which is completely
I didn't
irrelevant,
see
but
the
like
show, but yes,
yeah,
I know what you mean. Where it's
like
like
establish
connecting
something
the
for people
stories a
that
little bit, I guess.
exactly for the people who aren't going to watch that show, haven't watched that show,
Yep.
establish something there so they know that, oh, okay, so those they know each other. You're filling in the gaps. You're making a story better. You're
Yeah, and
storytelling.
they're kind of taking the Marvel approach, but worse. And I said this, I think, last episode as well, where they are trying to make this like interconnected story with all of these things.
Yep.
But they're failing. Where with Marvel, a lot of the times you you should see some of these movies, but you don't have to understand the plot. Like
Sure.
if I didn't see any of the individual movies and then watched Avengers, that still kind of makes sense, right? Like they're all superheroes. You may not know everything about them, but you
Right.
kind of know what's going on. Uh, This, it feels like you have to watch all of it. Like, if you had not seen the Clone Wars and you didn't know who Cad Bane was, then why should you care at all when he shows up and then dies 45 minutes later? Like, he doesn't really do anything that's that badass or anything like that, right? He just kind of, he wins
He
one duel and then loses the other. I
yeah,
don't know.
walks off,
It
doesn't
it
walk off
shouldn't
in
be a
sunset.
requirement to watch a 100 episodes of a TV show to understand a basic plot point of another one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, this is an overall story, which has sort of come up numerous times about what are they doing? What's their overall story and plot line from these shows that are now seemingly interconnected, much like Marvel is. But, and I don't know, people might not be the biggest fan of the MCU or what Feige is doing, but at least the man has a plan, and at least things actually flow from, shows into movies and movies into shows, second and third iterations of movies with, repeating characters. Like, it makes sense at that point. You took a beloved character to some people like Boba Fett, and you just sort of like tied him up to a bicycle and just rode your bike along the streets and was like, "We're having fun, right, Boba?" Like, and it's like, no, I'm not, because I'm not going anywhere. I'm just,
Yep.
following this story that's literally dragging me through the streets of Mos Espa. And this is the thing that also I didn't like. At the end of the episode, he and Fennec are walking, the streets, and everyone's bowing to him, and I'm like, when do you bow before a crime lord?
Yeah.
That's more of like a
I
politician, the governor, royalty sort of thing. I get it. You saved the people because those people loved you so much, because that was established, like we mentioned earlier on in this episode. Um, but then they have the conversation and they go, just it's I don't think it's meant for us, Fennec.
Yeah, it's like,
I
what the
don't think
fuck
we
was
belong
the
here. I was
point?
like, what's the freaking point? If you don't belong here, then this whole season does not belong here at
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
Oh my god! That at that point, I was just like,
I don't know what this show is trying to say at all about anything. I don't know why Boba Fett is alive. I just know that I hate it.
yeah, I would have been fine if they would have done something cheesy like, this season is all about family, and you killed my Tusken Raiders family. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't even say that. He was just sort of like,
Yeah,
okay,
it
and what? Like, oh, okay, well, get angry, Boba. Be like, I'm gonna kill you for that. Just show some sort of emotion at that point. Like, uh, and and it just fades away when it's Fennec, Boba, Chrysanthemum, and the Power Rangers, and that's it. And I'm like, so do we have a season two? Are we getting a season two? Um, but I don't know. Like, I think we could essentially keep talking about this, and that maybe we'll make another video about
yeah,
what's
the
upcoming.
state of Star Wars, maybe.
Instead of Star Wars,
We
because
did
we've got
got the Obi-Wan announcement.
May
Uh,
25th. So, but yeah, we'll call it quits here on this video. Leave your comments below, what you thought of this finale, what you thought of the entire season, that probably did need to exist in the first place and could have used those 2 episodes in Mando season 3. And yeah, you'll see us talk a lot more about Star Wars in the near future. And yeah, thanks for watching, and salute.
should I do another spin?
Yeah, do one more spin.
One more spin.
One more spin for
Alright. Oh shit.
it was done better than this
Now we
episode.
can end it.